The Grand Alliance Council chamber aboard Stellar Nexus Station hummed with the usual cacophony of 100 different species engaged in diplomatic discourse. Representatives from across the galaxy sat around the massive circular table, their translators working overtime to convert the clicks, whistles, and rumbles into comprehensible speech for all present. Under the vaulted crystalline dome that showcased the endless void of space, Captain Thrax of the Viridian delegation was mid-sentence when the emergency alert cut through all communication channels. SOS. Emergency. Narthos colony under attack. Unknown hostiles. Heavy casualties. Requesting immediate assistance. The message repeated, growing more desperate with each iteration. Silence fell across the chamber as all eyes turned to Alliance High Commander Zorix, a tall, slender being with iridescent skin who stood from his seat at the head of the table. "Situation report," Zorix demanded, his usually melodic voice sharp with concern. Admiral Vreel, head of Alliance military operations, stepped forward, her four arms manipulating a holographic display that materialized before the assembly. Narthos Colony, Outer Rim Sector 7, established 15 galactic standard years ago, population approximately 3 million. The colony is under heavy attack from unidentified vessels. Local defense forces are overwhelmed. Nearest Alliance fleet is at least 72 hours away at maximum speed. The chamber erupted in a flurry of concerned voices and suggestions, but Commander Zorix raised a hand, commanding silence once more. 3 million lives are at stake. We need solutions, not debate. From the shadows at the far end of the chamber, a figure stepped forward. Unlike the various exotic beings that populated the council, this one appeared deceptively simple, bipedal, with only 2 arms and legs, covered in a dark combat suit adorned with minimal insignia. Colonel Kalen Armitage, representative of Earth and commander of the Terran Rapid Response Division, moved toward the central display. "Earth forces can be on site in 6 hours, Kalen stated, his voice carrying the weight of countless battles. The scars visible on his face were merely a small sample of those he carried both physically and mentally. "We have a battle-ready battalion on standby at our forward operating base in Sector 6. A collective murmur of unease rippled through the assembly. Earth, or Terra, as it was known in galactic charts, was a relative newcomer to the Alliance, having joined only 30 years prior. More significantly, it was classified as a Class 5 death world, a planet so inherently hostile that its native species had evolved through constant warfare, not just against each other, but against their very environment. "Absolutely not." The objection came from Ambassador Kellix of the Aeonian Conclave, his chromatophores flashing danger patterns across his facial membranes. "We cannot send Terrans to a civilian colony. Their methods are too extreme, too violent. They would cause more harm than help." Kalen remained stone-faced, having endured such prejudice since Earth's admission to the Alliance. Humans were tolerated for their industrial capacity and innovative thinking, but feared for their unparalleled ability to wage war. Commander Zorix studied the human carefully. "Colonel Armitage, I'm well aware of your combat record. You fought in the Antarctic resource wars on your homeworld and led the defense against the Viridian pirate fleet 2 years ago. Your tactics are effective, but often result in significant collateral damage." "With respect, Commander," Kalen replied, "when you're fighting for survival, you don't have the luxury of minimizing property damage. The Narthosians don't need diplomats right now, they need soldiers, and my people are the best you've got within range." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Every being in the chamber knew the truth of his words, even if they were reluctant to admit it. Humans had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them at every turn, from microscopic pathogens to massive predators, from devastating weather to tectonic instability. This constant battle for survival had forged them into something the rest of the galaxy both feared and secretly envied: natural warriors. 6 hours, you say? Zorix finally asked. Yes, sir. We can have boots on the ground in 6 hours, with full combat loadout. Zorix exchanged glances with Admiral Vreel, who gave a reluctant nod. Very well, Colonel. Your Rapid Response Division is authorized to deploy to Narthos, but, he raised a finger in warning, you will take Alliance observers with you, and you will exercise restraint where possible. Kalen nodded curtly. Understood, Commander. We'll depart immediately. As he turned to leave, Ambassador Kellix called after him. Remember, Colonel, that these are civilians you're being sent to protect. Your kind may be accustomed to bloodshed, but try not to traumatize those you're supposed to be saving. Kalen paused at the doorway, his back to the assembly. Without turning, he replied, Ambassador, when you're facing an enemy intent on your annihilation, the line between savior and monster becomes very thin. My job is to make sure the Narthosians live long enough to debate the distinction. With that, he was gone, leaving the chamber in uncomfortable silence. Aboard the Terran vessel TSV Defiant, Colonel Kalen Armitage stood before his assembled troops in the ship's cavernous deployment bay. 200 men and women in advanced combat armor waited at attention, their faces a mixture of determination and grim readiness. The situation is straightforward, Kalen began, his voice echoing across the bay. Narthos colony is under attack by unknown hostiles. Local defenses are overwhelmed, and we're the closest combat-ready force. Our mission is to secure the colony, neutralize the threat, and evacuate civilians if necessary. He gestured to a holographic display showing the layout of the colony, a sprawling settlement nestled between towering purple-hued mountains and a vast crystalline lake. We'll drop in 3 waves. Alpha Team will secure the Central Administrative District. Bravo will establish a defensive perimeter around the main residential sectors. Charlie will operate as mobile response units to engage enemy concentrations. Major Tessa Miller, Kalen's second-in-command and chief tactical officer, stepped forward. Unlike her commander, whose face bore the marks of countless battles, Tessa's features remained unmarred, though the hardness in her eyes spoke of experiences no less harrowing. Intel on the hostiles is minimal, she announced, bringing up fragmented video feeds from the colony's failing surveillance systems. The images showed sleek, predatory figures moving with unnatural speed through the colony's streets, wielding weapons that fired streams of corrosive energy. Unknown biology, unknown technology, unknown motives. All we know is they're killing indiscriminately and taking no prisoners. Kalen nodded grimly. This is what we train for. People, the unknown, the unexpected. The Alliance may look down on us as brutish Deathworlders, but today, that's exactly what those colonists need. A tall, elegant figure moved to Kalen's side. Lieutenant Commander Tarak, the Alliance observer assigned to monitor the Terran operation. His species, the Alari, were known for their analytical minds and diplomatic finesse. Everything about him, from his flowing silver robes to his delicate 6-fingered hands, seemed out of place among the battle-ready humans. Colonel, Tarak interjected, his voice carrying the musical quality common to his species. I must remind you that Alliance protocols dictate a graduated response. You are authorized to use lethal force only as a last resort. A ripple of barely suppressed laughter passed through the assembled soldiers. Tessa didn't bother hiding her smirk. With all due respect, Lieutenant Commander, Kalen replied, maintaining a diplomatic tone, those protocols were written by species who've never had to fight for their survival. We'll follow them where practical, but my primary objective is protecting those colonists. Tarak's facial plumes, indicators of his emotional state, flattened against his skull in disapproval. "I will be documenting all deviations from protocol, Colonel." "Document away," Kalen replied, turning back to his troops. "Gear up. Drop in 30 minutes." As the soldiers dispersed to their preparations, Kalen retreated to his private quarters, a Spartan room containing little more than a bunk, a desk, and a small display case. Inside the case rested a tarnished medal, the Antarctic Cross, awarded for his service during the Earth's last great conflict before joining the galactic community. He rarely looked at it, but today, something compelled him to open the case and take the medal in his hand. The weight of it, both physical and metaphorical, brought back a flood of memories: the howling Antarctic winds, the screams of the wounded, the crushing responsibility of command. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts, followed by Tessa's voice over the intercom. "Colonel, we're approaching Narthos. You might want to see this." On the bridge, a grim-faced crew monitored their stations as the Defiant dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the Narthos system. The main view screen showed a scene of devastation. The colony's orbital defense platforms drifted in pieces, debris fields creating hazardous navigation conditions. Several merchant vessels lay dead in space, their hulls breached and lifeless. "Life signs?" Kalen asked, his voice tightly controlled. "Negative on the orbital installations," reported Lieutenant Connors from the sensor station, "but we're detecting significant activity on the surface, both colonial and something else." The view screen shifted to show the colony itself. Even from orbit, the signs of battle were evident, plumes of smoke rising from several districts, the defensive shield grid flickering erratically, and the unmistakable flashes of weapons fire. "Thermal imaging shows multiple hotspots," Tessa reported, manipulating the display. "Looks like the colonists have established several defensive positions, but they're being systematically targeted." Lieutenant Commander Tarak stepped onto the bridge, his plumes now fully erect in alarm. "This is worse than reported. We should request additional Alliance forces immediately. By the time they arrive, there won't be anyone left to save," Kalen replied grimly. He turned to his communications officer. "Establish contact with Colonial Defense Forces." After several tense moments, the view screen flickered to show a harried-looking Narthosian, a humanoid species with distinctive ridged foreheads and mottled blue skin. The background showed what appeared to be a makeshift command center, with wounded being treated nearby and personnel rushing in all directions. "This is Colonial Defense Coordinator Maris," the Narthosian said, his voice strained. "Whoever you are, we need immediate evacuation. The invaders have breached our inner defensive lines." "Coordinator, this is Colonel Kalen Armitage, Terran Rapid Response Division. We're here to help." Relief flashed across Maris's face, quickly followed by confusion. "Terrans? The Alliance sent humans?" "We're what they had," Kalen replied flatly. "What can you tell us about the hostiles?" Maris's expression hardened. "They appeared 3 days ago. No communication, no demands. They just started killing. Their technology is like nothing we've seen. Energy weapons that bypass our shields. Some kind of personal stealth technology. They're methodical. Colonel, this isn't random violence. They're executing a plan." "Numbers? Weaknesses?" "At least 500 combatants that we've confirmed. As for weaknesses," Maris shook his head, "we haven't found any. Our weapons barely slow them down." Kalen exchanged a glance with Tessa. This was worse than expected. Not just raiders or pirates, but an organized military force with superior technology. "Hold your position, Coordinator," Kalen said. "We're launching our dropships in 5 minutes. Transmit the coordinates of your strongest defensive positions, and we'll reinforce them first." "Colonel," Maris leaned closer to the screen, his voice dropping. "I should warn you, these invaders, they're not just killing. They're harvesting, taking our people. The ones they don't kill immediately are captured and transported to their ships. A cold anger settled in Kalen's chest. Understood, Coordinator. We'll be there soon. As the transmission ended, Tarak stepped forward, his plumes quivering. Colonel, this changes the mission parameters. If the invaders are taking captives, we must prioritize rescue operations. Agreed, Kalen said, surprising the Alliance observer. But to rescue the captives, we need to neutralize the captors. And for that, we need to do what humans do best. He turned to Tessa. Deploy all forces. Full combat protocols authorized. The dropships screamed through Narthos's atmosphere, their heat shields glowing as they descended toward the embattled colony. Inside the lead ship, Kalen checked his weapon one final time, a modified Alliance pulse rifle adapted to human specifications, with increased stopping power and reduced safety limiters. 2 minutes to touchdown, announced the pilot over the intercom. Enemy anti-aircraft fire detected. Deploying countermeasures. The ship lurched as it executed evasive maneuvers. Through the viewport, Kalen could see energy beams lancing up from the surface, seeking to intercept the incoming Terran forces. Remember, Kalen addressed his team, these colonists have never seen humans in combat. They've heard the stories, but they don't know what we're capable of. Show them. 30 seconds. Kalen engaged his helmet systems, the heads-up display flickering to life, providing tactical information and life sign readings. Beside him, Tessa did the same, her focus absolute as she mentally prepared for the coming battle. 10 seconds, brace for impact. The dropship hit the ground hard, its landing struts absorbing the impact. The moment they settled, the rear hatch blew open, and Kalen led the charge out into the chaos of Narthos colony. The scene that greeted them was one of devastation. What had once been a thriving colonial center was now a battlefield. Buildings lay in ruins, vehicles burned in the streets, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of energy weapon discharge. Alpha Team, with me, Kalen barked, directing his soldiers toward the central administrative complex, where Coordinator Maris had established his last defensive position. Bravo! Secure that residential block. Charlie, mobile defense. I want those civilians protected. As the Terran forces fanned out, they encountered their first group of invaders. The creatures were roughly humanoid but taller and more slender, with armored exoskeletons that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their movements were unnaturally fluid, almost predatory, and they wielded rifle-like weapons that fired streams of corrosive energy. Contact front, shouted Sergeant Reyes, the point man for Alpha Team. Without hesitation, he dropped to one knee and opened fire. The rest of the team followed suit, a disciplined volley of pulse fire streaking toward the invaders. The first shots seemed to have minimal effect, being absorbed by some kind of energy field surrounding the creatures, but the Terrans adjusted quickly, concentrating their fire on individual targets. Under the sustained barrage, the protective fields faltered, and the invaders began to fall. Kalen moved forward with his team, his rifle spitting death with mechanical precision. Push through, don't give them time to regroup. The Terrans advanced relentlessly, their combat doctrine fundamentally different from the defensive posture the colonists had adopted. Where the Narthosians had tried to establish and hold positions, the humans attacked continuously, never allowing the enemy to dictate the terms of engagement. Through his tactical comm, Kalen received updates from the other teams. Bravo had secured the residential sector and was evacuating civilians to the designated safe zones. Charlie was engaged in heavy fighting near the colony's power distribution center, a strategically vital location. Colonel, Tessa called out, pointing toward a group of invaders dragging several Narthosian civilians toward a waiting transport. They're taking more captives. Intercept team, on me, Kalen commanded, signaling to a squad of his best soldiers. Together, they broke away from the main force and charged toward the transport. The invaders saw them coming and turned to engage, their strange weapons firing deadly energy that forced the humans to seek cover. Kalen ducked behind a damaged vehicle, assessing the situation. There were 12 invaders, all heavily armed, with 8 captive colonists. "Suppressing fire," he ordered. Half of his team opened fire, forcing the invaders to take defensive positions. "Miller, Gonzalez, Jenkins, flanking maneuver, now!" Tessa and 2 other soldiers broke away, using the chaos of the firefight to circle around behind the enemy position. Kalen waited until they were in position, then gave the signal. "Execute!" A coordinated attack erupted from 3 directions, catching the invaders in a deadly crossfire. Several fell immediately, their armor penetrated by the concentrated fire. The others attempted to retreat toward their transport, dragging the captives with them. Kalen vaulted over his cover and charged forward, firing as he ran. An invader turned toward him, weapon raised. But Kalen was faster. A burst of pulse fire caught the creature in what passed for its head, dropping it instantly. "Secure the civilians!" Kalen shouted as his team overwhelmed the remaining invaders. The last of the creatures fell, and the Terran soldiers quickly moved to free the captives. The Narthosians were in shock, their blue skin pale with fear, eyes wide as they looked upon their human rescuers. One of them, a female with scientific insignia on her torn uniform, approached Kalen. "You're Terrans," she said, her voice trembling. "From Earth." Kalen nodded as he checked the perimeter, ensuring no more invaders were approaching. "That's right, we're here to help. I am Dr. Alara Cern, lead xenobiologist for the colony." She introduced herself, regaining some composure. "I've been studying these invaders since they first attacked. You need to know, they're not just killing indiscriminately. They're studying us, testing our defenses, learning our weaknesses. It's methodical." Kalen's attention sharpened. "A scientific approach to conquest?" Dr. Cern nodded grimly. "Exactly. And they're adapting quickly. Weapons that were effective initially are now being countered. They learn, Colonel, faster than any species I've encountered." This was valuable intelligence. Kalen activated his comm from units. "Be advised. Enemy forces demonstrate rapid tactical adaptation. Vary your attack patterns and weapons configurations. Don't establish predictable behaviors." He turned back to Dr. Cern. "We need to get you and the others to a secure location. Then I want to hear everything you know about these invaders." As they prepared to move the rescued civilians, Lieutenant Commander Tarak approached, his silver robes now stained with dust and smoke. He had been observing from a distance, documenting the Terran combat methods as ordered by Alliance Command. "Colonel," he said, his voice tight with disapproval, "your forces are using excessive firepower in residential areas. The property damage is—" "With all due respect, Lieutenant Commander," Kalen cut him off, "I don't give a damn about property damage right now. We're fighting an enemy that's capturing civilians for unknown purposes. Every moment we waste is another life potentially lost." Tarak's plumes flattened in anger. "There are protocols, Colonel. The Alliance cannot condone—" "The Alliance isn't here," Kalen snapped. "We are, and we're going to do whatever it takes to save these people." He turned to his team. "Move out. Get these civilians to the safe zone, then rejoin the main force." As the group moved through the devastated streets, Dr. Cern fell in step beside Kalen. "Your methods are different from what I expected," she admitted. "The Alliance, they speak of humans as brutish, prone to unnecessary violence, but what I'm seeing is precision, efficiency." Kalen's expression remained neutral. "We're good at war, Dr. Cern. It's not something we're proud of, but it's a fact. On Earth, conflict has been a constant for most of our history, not just against each other, but against our environment. Our planet tried to kill us daily. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. We survived because we learned to fight back, to adapt, to overcome. A death world, she murmured, using the Alliance classification for planets like Earth. That's what they call it, Kalen agreed. But to us, it was just home, and it taught us lessons that most Alliance species never had to learn. Their conversation was interrupted by an explosion nearby. Kalen instinctively pushed Dr. Cern behind cover, scanning for threats. Through the smoke, he saw a new wave of invaders advancing, their weapons firing indiscriminately. "Contact," he shouted, raising his rifle. "All units, fall back to defensive positions." The battle for Narthos colony had only just begun. In the makeshift command center established in the colony's main administrative building, Kalen studied the tactical display with growing concern. After 6 hours of intense fighting, the situation was becoming clearer and more troubling. "They're not just raiders," he said to his assembled officers and the colonial leadership. "This is a full-scale invasion force, with clear objectives and coordinated tactics." The holographic display showed the colony and surrounding areas, with red indicators marking confirmed enemy positions and blue showing Terran and colonial forces. The pattern was unmistakable. The invaders were systematically taking control of key infrastructure and defensive positions. "What do they want?" asked Coordinator Maris, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "They haven't made any demands, haven't attempted communication." Dr. Alara Cern, now serving as the scientific advisor to the joint defense effort, stepped forward. In the hours since her rescue, she had proven herself invaluable, providing crucial insights into the invaders' biology and technology. "Based on the pattern of their attacks and what we've observed of their collection methods, I believe they're conducting a form of field research," she explained, bringing up data on a secondary display. "They're capturing subjects from various demographic groups, different ages, sexes, health conditions. They're studying us." "For what purpose?" Lieutenant Commander Tarak asked, his initial disapproval of the Terran methods now tempered by the reality of the situation. "Unknown," Dr. Cern admitted, "but given their technological superiority, it's unlikely they're interested in our scientific knowledge. More likely, they're assessing us as a potential resource." "Slaves?" Tessa suggested grimly. "Possibly. Or worse." Kalen studied the display again, noting a pattern in the enemy movements. "They're establishing a perimeter around the northern sector. That's where most of their transport ships have been landing." He pointed to a large structure near the center of the red-marked territory. "And that's the colony's main research facility, isn't it?" Dr. Cern nodded. "Yes. It contains our most advanced equipment and our biological research labs. If they're conducting scientific analysis of captured colonists, that would be the ideal location. Then that's our primary objective." Kalen decided. "We need to breach their perimeter, infiltrate the research facility, and rescue any captives. Simultaneously, we'll target their transport ships to prevent them from removing more colonists off-world." Tarak's plumes twitched with concern. "That's an extremely aggressive strategy. Colonel, the Alliance would recommend a more cautious approach, perhaps attempting communication or waiting for reinforcements." "The Alliance isn't here," Kalen replied, echoing his earlier sentiment, "and by the time reinforcements arrive, there may be no one left to save." He turned to Dr. Cern. "You've studied these creatures. Any weaknesses we can exploit?" The xenobiologist hesitated, then activated her personal data device, displaying detailed scans of the invaders' physiology. "Their exoskeletons provide significant protection, but there are junction points, here, and here, where the armor is thinner to allow for movement. Additionally, they appear to rely heavily on some form of distributed neural network rather than a centralized brain. Damage to multiple nodes is required to neutralize them." What about their technology, the energy shields that protect them? The shields appear to operate on a frequency-dependent absorption mechanism. They're most effective against energy weapons calibrated to Alliance standard frequencies. A slight smile curved her lips. Fortunately, your Terran modifications to the standard pulse rifles have already proven more effective. Kalen nodded. We can work with that. Major Miller, I want our weapons recalibrated to exploit these vulnerabilities. Sergeant Reyes, prepare a strike team for the research facility infiltration. Lieutenant Kim, your engineers will target the transport ships. As the officers dispersed to prepare their teams, Kalen found himself alone with Dr. Cern and Lieutenant Commander Tarak. The Alliance observer studied him with a mixture of concern and growing respect. You're committing to a direct assault against a technologically superior force, Tarak noted. The risk is enormous. Risk is part of warfare, Kalen replied simply, and sometimes the direct approach is the one the enemy least expects. Dr. Cern's expression was thoughtful. The Alliance has always viewed humans as unpredictable and prone to excessive force, but there's a logic to your approach that I hadn't appreciated before. You're not just being aggressive, you're denying the enemy the opportunity to fully utilize their advantages. Earth history is full of examples of technologically inferior forces defeating superior ones through audacity and unconventional tactics. Kalen explained, we learned long ago that winning isn't about having the best weapons, it's about using what you have more effectively than your opponent. Tarak's plumes shifted in what Kalen had come to recognize as a sign of contemplation. The Alliance has much to learn about human warfare, it seems. Let's hope the lesson doesn't come too late for Narthos, Kalen replied grimly. The infiltration team assembled in the pre-dawn hours, when Narthos's 3 moons provided just enough light to navigate by but not enough to expose their movements. Kalen had selected 12 of his best soldiers, each equipped with modified weapons and specialized gear for the mission. Remember, he briefed them one final time, our primary objective is rescuing the captives. Secondary objectives are gathering intelligence on the enemy and sabotaging their research if possible. This is a stealth operation until it isn't. Once we're compromised, we'll have minutes at most before they bring overwhelming force to bear. Sergeant Reyes, a veteran of multiple high-risk operations, checked his tactical display. Sir, our scouts report at least 50 hostiles guarding the research facility perimeter, with more inside. That's a lot of firepower to go through. We're not going through them, Kalen replied. We're going under them. He activated a holographic display showing detailed schematics of the colony. Dr. Cern provided access to the maintenance tunnel network. There's an access point here, 300 meters from our current position, that will take us directly beneath the research facility. Tessa, who would be leading a diversionary attack on the opposite side of the enemy perimeter, studied the plan with a tactical eye. The tunnels haven't been compromised. The invaders seem to be focusing on above-ground infrastructure, Kalen explained. According to Dr. Cern, the tunnel network was designed for emergency evacuation and isn't on the main colony schematics. It's a security measure against exactly this kind of situation. As the infiltration team made final preparations, Dr. Cern approached Kalen. She had insisted on accompanying them, despite the obvious dangers, arguing that her knowledge of the research facility and its systems would be invaluable. I've been analyzing the data from our encounters with the invaders, she said, her voice low. There's something I didn't mention in the briefing because I'm not entirely certain, but I believe they may be connected to a hive mind of sorts. Kalen's expression sharpened. Explain. Their neural network isn't just distributed within individual bodies. There are indications of a field effect that links multiple individuals. They operate with a level of coordination that suggests shared consciousness, or at least shared sensory input. That would explain their rapid tactical adaptation, Kalen mused. If one of them learns something, they all learn it. Exactly. And if my theory is correct, disrupting that network could potentially disorient or even incapacitate them temporarily. How would we disrupt it? Dr. Cern hesitated. I'm not certain. We would need to identify the frequency of their neural communications and generate a counter-frequency. The research facility has equipment that could be repurposed for this. Kalen considered this new information. That becomes our tertiary objective. Then, if we can access the necessary equipment, we'll attempt to disrupt their neural network. He studied her with newfound respect. That's good work, Dr. Cern. She smiled tightly. I'm a xenobiologist. Colonel, understanding alien life forms is my specialty. I just never expected to apply it in a combat situation. War has a way of revealing hidden talents, Kalen replied, a shadow crossing his features. For a moment, memories of the Antarctic conflict threatened to surface. The bitter cold, the desperate battles, the weight of command decisions that cost lives. He pushed them aside, focusing on the present. Let's move out. The infiltration began smoothly. The access point to the maintenance tunnels was concealed within an abandoned storage facility, untouched by the invasion force. Kalen led his team down into the darkness, their helmet-mounted lights illuminating the narrow passageways. Comms check, he whispered as they moved deeper into the tunnel network. Each team member responded in turn, confirming their communications were operational, but set to short range only to avoid detection. Dr. Cern moved alongside Kalen, her specialized scanner monitoring for signs of the invaders' neural signatures. Nothing yet, she reported, but the shielding in these tunnels may be interfering with the readings. They progressed through the labyrinthine passages, guided by the schematics loaded into their tactical displays. After 20 minutes of cautious movement, they reached a vertical shaft that led directly up to the research facility's sublevel. This is it, Kalen announced, examining the access hatch above them. According to the schematics, this opens into a maintenance room adjacent to the main laboratory complex. Reyes, take point. Jenkins, cover R6. Everyone else, standard infiltration formation. As Sergeant Reyes prepared to open the hatch, Kalen received a transmission from Tessa. Alpha Lead, this is Diversion Actual. We are in position and ready to initiate on your mark. Understood. Diversion Actual. Stand by. Kalen turned to his team. Once we're inside, we move fast. Dr. Cern will guide us to the primary laboratory where the captives are most likely being held, weapons free, but prioritize stealth as long as possible. He gave Reyes the signal, and the sergeant carefully unlocked the hatch, lifting it just enough to scan the room above with a fiber optic camera. After a tense moment, he nodded. Clear. One by one, the infiltration team emerged into a dimly lit maintenance room filled with equipment and spare parts. Dr. Cern immediately oriented herself, pointing toward a heavy door on the far wall. The main laboratory complex is through there and to the left. The primary research area should be at the center. Kalen activated his comm. Diversion Actual. Execute. Moments later, distant explosions shook the facility as Tessa's team launched their diversionary attack on the opposite side of the complex. Alarms began to sound, and the infiltration team could hear the distinctive sounds of the invaders mobilizing to respond. Now, Kalen ordered, and they moved swiftly through the door and into the corridor beyond. The interior of the research facility had been transformed by the invaders. Strange. Organic-looking technology had been integrated with the existing Narthosian equipment, creating a hybrid environment that seemed both familiar and deeply alien. The walls pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, and the air was thick with an acrid, chemical scent. They encountered their first resistance 2 corridors in, a pair of invaders moving rapidly toward the source of the diversionary attack. The Terran soldiers eliminated them with silenced weapons before they could raise an alarm, but Kalen knew their presence wouldn't remain undetected for long. "Scanner showing increased neural activity ahead," Dr. Cern whispered, indicating a large chamber at the end of the current corridor. "Multiple signatures, both invader and Narthosian." Kalen signaled for the team to take position on either side of the entrance to the chamber. Using a fiber optic camera again, they assessed what lay beyond. The sight turned Kalen's blood cold. The chamber was indeed the main laboratory, but it had been converted into a nightmarish research facility. Dozens of Narthosian colonists were suspended in transparent chambers filled with a viscous fluid, various instruments monitoring and, in some cases, modifying their bodies. Invaders moved between the chambers, recording data and adjusting equipment. "They're experimenting on them," Dr. Cern breathed, horror evident in her voice. "Cataloging physiological responses, genetic material, neural patterns." Kalen's jaw tightened. "How do we get them out?" Dr. Cern studied the chamber setup. "The fluid suspension appears to be life-supporting. They're not being tortured, they're being preserved while being studied. Each chamber has individual controls. We would need to deactivate them one by one." "How many invaders in the chamber?" "I count 15, replied Sergeant Reyes, "plus whatever additional forces respond when we engage." Kalen considered their options. A direct assault would put the captives at risk, but stealth was no longer a viable approach for extracting so many prisoners. "New plan," he decided. "Dr. Cern, you mentioned equipment that could disrupt their neural network. Where would it be?" She pointed to a section of the laboratory filled with what appeared to be signal processing equipment. "There, that's the colony's quantum resonance scanner. It could be repurposed to generate an interference pattern if I can access the controls." "That's our target. Then we disrupt their network, neutralize the immediate threats, and then extract the captives." Kalen turned to his team. "Flashbangs and smoke. Full spectrum disorientation. Dr. Cern stays with me, the rest of you. Secure the perimeter and prepare for extraction." The assault was executed with the precision that came from years of training and combat experience. Flashbang grenades detonated simultaneously throughout the chamber, temporarily blinding and disorienting the invaders. Smoke grenades followed, filling the space with obscuring clouds that the Terran soldiers' enhanced vision could penetrate, but the invaders apparently could not. Kalen led Dr. Cern directly to the quantum resonance scanner, providing covering fire as she worked to reprogram the equipment. The invaders, recovering from the initial shock, began to return fire, their energy weapons lancing through the smoke. "Status?" Kalen demanded, dropping an invader with a precise burst of fire. "Almost there," Dr. Cern replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "I'm isolating the frequency of their neural communications, configuring the disruptor. We need to maintain this position for 2 more minutes." Around them, the battle intensified. The Terran soldiers fought with the controlled ferocity that had earned humans their fearsome reputation, but the invaders were adapting quickly, coordinating their movements with unsettling efficiency. 1 minute, Dr. Cern called, her voice tight with concentration. "Colonel, when this activates, there may be a backlash effect. All electronic systems could be temporarily disrupted, including your equipment." "Understood. All units, prepare for temporary systems failure. Switch to backup protocols." The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity as the firefight grew more intense. Sergeant Reyes took a hit to his left arm, the energy beam burning through his armor, but he continued fighting without pause, switching his weapon to his uninjured arm. "Ready," Dr. Cern announced. "Activating in 3, 2, 1. A wave of invisible energy pulsed outward from the scanner. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the invaders began to falter. Their coordinated movements became erratic, their firing patterns chaotic. Some dropped their weapons entirely, clutching at what passed for their heads, while others collapsed to the floor, their limbs twitching uncontrollably. As predicted, the Terran equipment flickered and failed, helmet displays going dark and communications cutting out. But they had prepared for this, immediately switching to visual signals and backup protocols. "It worked," Dr. Cern exclaimed. "Their neural network is disrupted, but it won't last long. Their biology will adapt." "How long do we have?" Kalen asked, already moving toward the captive colonists. "Minutes at most. We need to move quickly." Kalen directed his team to begin releasing the captives from their suspension chambers, following Dr. Cern's instructions on safely deactivating the life support systems without harming the Narthosians. Many were unconscious, requiring the soldiers to carry them. Others were awake but disoriented, having to be guided. As they worked, Kalen's comm system gradually came back online. "Alpha Lid, this is Diversion Actual." Tessa's voice crackled through. "Be advised, enemy forces are regrouping. We've created a corridor to Extraction Point Bravo, but it won't hold for long." "Understood. We're moving out with approximately 30 liberated captives. Many need assistance." "Copy that. We'll hold the line." With the last of the captives freed, the infiltration team began their withdrawal, moving as quickly as the situation allowed. The effects of the neural disruption were already wearing off, with some invaders beginning to recover and reorganize. They had just reached the corridor leading to their escape route when a new wave of invaders appeared, cutting off their retreat. These were different from the others, larger, more heavily armored, with more advanced weapons, elite troops held in reserve until now. "Find another way out," Kalen ordered, laying down suppressing fire as his team scrambled for cover. "Dr. Cern, options?" The xenobiologist frantically consulted the facility schematics. "There's an emergency evacuation tunnel on the lower level, designed for hazardous material containment breaches. It leads directly to the surface, approximately 500 meters from the facility. That's our new exit. Reyes, take point. Everyone else, defensive formation around the civilians." They fought their way to a service lift that would take them to the lower level, the elite invaders in close pursuit. The confined space of the corridors made the fighting intense and personal, often devolving into hand-to-hand combat when the ranges closed to mere meters. Here, the humans' unique advantages became apparent. Evolved on a high-gravity world with predators that forced the development of exceptional reflexes and strength. The Terran soldiers were formidable in close quarters. Where the invaders relied on technology and coordinated tactics, the humans adapted instinctively to the chaotic conditions of room-to-room fighting. They reached the lift just as their pursuers were reinforced by additional troops. Kalen and 3 soldiers held the corridor while the civilians and the rest of the team crowded into the lift. "Go," Kalen shouted to Sergeant Reyes. "Get them out. We'll hold here and follow on the next lift." As the lift doors closed, Kalen and his remaining team members took defensive positions, preparing for the next wave of attackers. Their ammunition was running low, and 2 of the soldiers had sustained injuries, but they maintained their discipline. The next few minutes were a blur of intense combat. The invaders pressed forward relentlessly, seemingly unconcerned with their own casualties. Kalen and his team fell back step by step, making the enemy pay for every meter of ground gained. When the lift returned, they piled in, Kalen being the last to enter as he provided covering fire. An energy blast caught him in the shoulder just as the doors were closing, the impact throwing him against the back wall of the lift. "Colonel," one of his soldiers exclaimed, moving to check the wound. "I'm fine," Kalen grunted, though the pain was intense. The armor had absorbed much of the blast, but the heat had penetrated, causing a severe burn. "Status on the rest of the team?" "They've reached the evacuation tunnel and are proceeding to the exit point. Diversion team is falling back to the rendezvous coordinates." The lift reached the lower level, and they emerged into a sterile environment designed for handling hazardous materials. Signs in the Narthosian language marked the way to the emergency evacuation tunnel. They moved swiftly through the area, expecting pursuit at any moment. The tunnel entrance was secured by a heavy blast door, which they sealed behind them once inside. "That won't hold them for long," Kalen noted, "but it should buy us enough time to reach the exit." The evacuation tunnel was wide enough for vehicles, designed to facilitate rapid removal of dangerous materials. They jogged along its length, maintaining communication with the forward team. "Alpha Lead, this is Point. We've reached the exit," Sergeant Reyes reported. "Area is secure for now. Civilians are being transferred to medical transport." "Copy that. Point. We're 5 minutes out. Any sign of pursuit?" "Negative, but we're picking up significant movement on the surface. They know we've escaped with the captives, and they're mobilizing to intercept." As they neared the exit, Kalen received another transmission, this one from Tessa. "Alpha Lead, be advised. Enemy forces are converging on your exit point from multiple directions. We're moving to provide support, but you'll be exposed when you emerge." "Understood. Have the civilian transports withdraw immediately. We'll provide rear guard." The tunnel ended at another blast door, beyond which lay the surface of Narthos and the waiting enemy forces. Kalen's team prepared for combat, checking weapons and ensuring their remaining ammunition was distributed optimally. "On my mark," Kalen ordered, positioning himself by the door controls. 3, 2, 1, mark! The blast door slid open, revealing the barren landscape of Narthos's mining district. The evacuation tunnel had emerged in a quarry, with steep walls providing some cover. In the distance, they could see the civilian transports lifting off, protected by Tessa's diversionary team, who were engaged with approaching invaders. Kalen and his team sprinted from the tunnel entrance, taking up defensive positions among the rock formations. From their elevated vantage point, they could see enemy forces converging from multiple directions. "We need to buy time for the transports to reach safe distance," Kalen communicated to his team. "Conserve ammunition, make every shot count." The battle that followed was among the most intense of Kalen's career. The invaders, apparently enraged by the loss of their research subjects, attacked with renewed ferocity. Wave after wave of them charged the Terran positions, their advanced weapons chipping away at the rocky cover. As the civilian transports disappeared over the horizon, Kalen received confirmation that they had reached the secure zone established by the remaining Terran forces. "All civilians clear," Tessa reported. "Extraction team standing by at coordinates Echo 9. Can you make it there?" Kalen assessed their situation. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and running critically low on ammunition. The extraction point was over a kilometer away, across open terrain. "Negative," he replied grimly. "Position is untenable. We'll create a diversion to draw enemy forces away from Echo 9. You extract the civilians to the Defiant." There was a pause before Tessa's response came. "Understood, sir, but we're not leaving you behind. Aerial support is inbound. Hold position." Before Kalen could argue, the distinctive sound of Terran assault shuttles filled the air. 3 craft streaked overhead, their weapon systems targeting the invader concentrations with devastating precision. "All units, this is Captain Wallace of the TSV Dauntless," a new voice announced over the comm. "We received your distress call and have arrived to provide support. The Alliance fleet is 6 hours behind us." A surge of relief washed over Kalen. The Dauntless was another Terran vessel, presumably in the sector for training exercises. Her arrival changed the tactical situation entirely. "Captain Wallace, this is Colonel Armitage. Appreciate the assist. We have civilians evacuating to designated safe zones and multiple teams engaged with hostile forces throughout the colony." "Understood, Colonel. We're deploying additional ground forces to secure those zones. Can you provide tactical assessment of the enemy? As the assault shuttles continued their strafing runs, keeping the invaders at bay, Kalen transmitted everything they had learned about the enemy, their biology, technology, tactics, and the neural network that connected them. We've identified a vulnerability in their neural communication system, he explained. Dr. Alara Cern, a Narthosian xenobiologist, developed a method to disrupt it temporarily. With your ship's more powerful transmitters, you might be able to extend the effect across the entire colony. Send the specifications. We'll have our science team implement it immediately. With aerial support providing cover, Kalen and his team were able to break out of their surrounded position and make their way to the new extraction coordinates. The battle was far from over, but the tide had begun to turn. As they boarded the extraction shuttle, Kalen caught sight of Lieutenant Commander Tarak observing from a distance, his expression unreadable but his plumes raised in what might have been respect. Aboard the TSV Defiant, now coordinating with the newly arrived Dauntless, Kalen received medical treatment for his shoulder wound while simultaneously directing the ongoing defense of the colony. The ship's communication center had been converted into a joint command post, with representatives from both Terran vessels and the Narthosian colonial leadership present. Dr. Alara Cern worked with the Dauntless's science team to refine and amplify the neural disruption technique. Using the warship's powerful transmitters, they were able to broadcast the disruption signal across the entire colony, temporarily incapacitating the invader forces and allowing the Terrans to gain the upper hand. The effect won't last indefinitely, Dr. Cern cautioned. Their biology adapts quickly. Each time we use this, it becomes less effective. Then we make the most of it while we can, Kalen replied. Captain Wallace, status of the ground operation? The captain, a veteran officer with a reputation for unconventional tactics, studied the tactical display. We've secured approximately 70% of the colony. The invaders are falling back to their ships, but they're laying down covering fire. It appears they're preparing for withdrawal. Let's not make it easy for them, Kalen suggested. If we can capture one of their vessels, we might learn more about who they are and why they attacked Narthos. Agreed. I've already dispatched a special operations team to target the smallest of their ships, which appears to be a scout vessel. Lieutenant Commander Tarak, who had remained largely silent since the arrival of the Dauntless, finally spoke. The Alliance fleet will be arriving soon. Perhaps we should wait for their support before pursuing the enemy further. Kalen exchanged a glance with Captain Wallace, a silent communication passing between the two Terran officers. With respect, Lieutenant Commander, Kalen replied. Waiting could mean losing our opportunity. The invaders are adapting to our tactics and technology with each engagement. If they escape with the knowledge they've gained, they'll be even more dangerous next time. Tarak's plumes flattened briefly, then rose again in reluctant acceptance. You've proven your methods effective, Colonel. I will include that in my report to Alliance Command. Over the next several hours, the combined Terran forces systematically reclaimed the colony from the invaders. The neural disruption technique, used sparingly and at strategic moments, provided critical advantages during key engagements. Meanwhile, the Special Operations Team successfully captured the invader scout vessel, though not without casualties. As the last of the invader ships retreated from Narthos's atmosphere, a cheer went up from the colonial defense forces. After days of relentless assault, the nightmare was finally ending. In the aftermath, as medical teams treated the wounded and engineering crews began the process of rebuilding, Kalen found himself standing at a viewport, looking out at the scarred landscape of Narthos. Dr. Cern joined him, her expression thoughtful. Your people fought with a ferocity I've never witnessed, she said quietly, but also with a discipline and coordination that belies the Alliance's perception of humans. Kalen continued staring out at the horizon. We've had a lot of practice. Because of your homeworld, Earth. He nodded. Earth shaped us in ways that are hard for other species to understand. When your planet actively tries to kill you, when predators and disasters are a constant threat, you either develop effective ways to fight back or you perish. The Deathworlders, she murmured, but that term seems insufficient now. Perhaps survivors would be more accurate. A slight smile touched Kalen's lips. We'll take that as a compliment. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Coordinator Maris, accompanied by Lieutenant Commander Tarak. Both appeared exhausted but relieved. Colonel Armitage, Maris began, his voice heavy with emotion. On behalf of the Narthos colony, I extend our deepest gratitude. Without Earth's intervention, we would have been lost. Kalen acknowledged the thanks with a nod. We did what was necessary. Any Alliance member would have done the same. No, Tarak interjected, surprising everyone present. They would not have. Most Alliance species would have waited for consensus, for proper protocols to be established, for reinforcements to arrive. By then, it would have been too late. His plumes shifted in a pattern Kalen hadn't seen before. The Alliance has much to learn from Earth. It seems. What happens now? Dr. Cern asked. The invaders retreated, but they weren't defeated. They'll return, perhaps to Narthos, perhaps elsewhere. We'll be ready, Kalen assured her. The captured scout ship will provide valuable intelligence, and the Alliance now has first-hand evidence of what humans bring to the table in a crisis. Coordinator Maris nodded solemnly. When we sent that distress call, we had no idea who would respond. The SOS was clear. We needed help, desperately. And Earth sent its Deathworlders. A genuine smile spread across his features. We couldn't have asked for better allies. As if on cue, the communication system announced the arrival of the Alliance fleet, 6 warships dropping out of FTL, too late to participate in the battle but in time to witness its outcome. I should prepare my report for the Alliance command, Tarak said, his tone suggesting that this report would differ significantly from what he might have written before the invasion. Include everything, Kalen suggested, the good and the bad. The Alliance needs to understand both the risks and benefits of having humans as members. After Tarak and Maris departed, Dr. Cern lingered, studying Kalen with newfound interest. You carry many scars, Colonel, not all of them visible. Your past conflicts have marked you deeply. Kalen's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. The memories of the Antarctic War, the difficult decisions, the lives lost under his command were never far from his thoughts. War leaves its mark on everyone, he replied simply. Yet you continue to fight, to put yourself in harm's way for others. He turned from the viewport to face her directly. That's the paradox of humanity. Dr. Cern, we're shaped by conflict, forged in adversity, capable of terrible violence when necessary, but we're also driven to protect, to save, to preserve life even at the cost of our own. Deathworlders with the hearts of guardians, she mused, a fascinating contradiction. Not a contradiction, Kalen corrected, a consequence. We understand the value of life precisely because we know how easily it can be lost. As they spoke, Tessa approached, datapad in hand. Colonel, preliminary analysis of the captured vessel. You'll want to see this. The data showed that the invaders, who called themselves the Harvester Collective according to the ship's logs, had attacked several other worlds before Narthos, all with similar objectives, to study, catalog, and collect specimens from various species. But more concerning was the evidence that the collective was merely a scouting force for a much larger entity, one that viewed the entire Alliance territory as potential harvesting grounds. So this was just the beginning, Kalen observed grimly. Yes, sir, Tessa confirmed. And based on these navigation charts, they've been systematically working their way through the outer colonies, gathering information on all Alliance species. We need to get this to Alliance Command immediately. They need to understand what we're facing. As preparations began for a full briefing of the Alliance leadership, now en route to Narthos, Kalen reflected on the path that had brought him here. From the bitter conflicts on Earth to the vast expanse of space, the fundamental truth remained. Sometimes, survival required embracing the very aspects of humanity that the Alliance found most disturbing. The coming conflict would test not only the military might of the Alliance, but its willingness to accept and utilize the unique capabilities of its most controversial member, Earth, and its Deathworlders. As if reading his thoughts, Dr. CERN said quietly, "The Alliance feared what humans might bring to our collective, your capacity for violence, your evolutionary adaptations to constant threat. But now, it seems those very traits may be our salvation." Kalen nodded, his gaze returning to the stars visible through the viewport. Somewhere out there, the Harvester Collective was regrouping, adapting, preparing for their next incursion. And when they returned, they would find humanity waiting, the guardians born of a world that taught them to fight, to survive, and above all, to protect those who could not protect themselves. The SOS had been clear: help us, and Earth had sent its Deathworlders. It would not be the last time.